doesn't exist. It always becomes elites sucking the trough dry. But regardless, fundamentally, we've all been turned into these. Well, I guess there was an article written, a short story by the late, great Kurt Vonnegut, who actually sent me some of his artwork one time, and right before he died, and said he appreciated my work. That's something I treasure at my house. But side issue of a world where everybody's got to be made equal. So tall people have their legs chopped off, and smart people are given lobotomies, and this is the system. And these control freak eugenicists want to dumb down intelligent people to make us more manageable. But there's no doubt these are sickos. And there's no doubt these death penalties are real. And he wrote for Atlantic Monthly. Which, again, is just sick. And he has these quotes about doctors shouldn't be so obsessed with the Hippocratic Oath. Tarpley, I want to go back to calls here in a moment. We're going to keep you to the end to cover eugenics coming up at the bottom of the hour, part 2 on your analysis from last week. But I think the reason they're able to get away with some of this is it's so hard for people to come to grips with the mindset. So before we go back to calls, is it that these bureaucrats, these control freaks, these oligarchs get off on denying people care? Is it that they disdain having to eat at restaurants with the general public or stand in line with the public? I mean, why do they have such an instinct to kill and abuse and do wickedness? I don't understand it.
Well, it's the mentality of oligarchy and elitism, and we have historical examples going back as far as civilization, certainly to the Greeks and the Egyptian priesthoods in many ways represent an oligarchy. The modern group, of course, as we've seen with Holdren, they're Malthusians. They believe in zero growth, the limits of growth, that the planet is overpopulated. They think that people pollute, that the average human being is a threat to nature or to their favorite hobby, be it the polar bear, the spotted owl, the snail darter, or some other exotic species, right? Some kind of orchids that they may cultivate. The oligarch needs to view the mass of humanity as subhuman or somehow inferior. The problem of the oligarch is always to justify the irrational domination. And why should the oligarchy rule and not somebody else? Are the oligarchy more competent? Are they more intelligent? Are they more humane? No, they're none of these things. They're failures. Look at Larry Summers. He's a fool. He's a failure. He destroyed the Harvard University endowment with his economic policy.
I agree with you. I think it's fundamentally they're diseased and ugly and bent. Generally, when I see these elitists, they're really physically horrifying and very disgusting and spit dripping. And I've read some of their writings. They hate seeing a family with a good-looking husband and wife and happy kids. They hate flying over our swimming pools and houses and cars and barbecues. And they just, like the Wicked Witch, what's the fairy tale about Sleeping Beauty? Sleeping Beauty. They just want to come ruin the party.
I would also, let's give a more concrete example, right? Rationing of care was the question before. Let's look at Michelle Obama. Now, we've had this interesting proposition. I write about it in my book. A man can hide what he believes, but the choice of women, especially the choice of a wife, often reveals a great deal about one's own character. So Obama has chosen Michelle Obama as his wife. Well, what was her business? She worked for the University of Chicago Hospital. She was in healthcare. Now, this is a very modern, state-of-the-art, world-class hospital that happens to be separated by just a few blocks from one of the worst inner-city ghettos, where there are a lot of poor black people who don't have any health care. So the problem that, as they saw it, the University of Chicago saw, was that poor black people were coming out of the inner-city ghetto and coming into the University of Chicago hospital emergency room and asking for treatment. So they needed to hire what amounts to a bouncer. They created a patient dumping scheme, and the head of the patient dumping scheme was Michelle Obama.
Just like Margaret Sanger said, we got to have blacks to kill these animals. We got to have a black to lead them to their death. And so she drives them over to the euthanasia or to the hospice or to the scum facility. And again, that's what she does. And they enjoy pimping. They enjoy hurting people. They enjoy scamming. They enjoy it. I mean, and you just see her eyes. She just radiates evil and whoredom. No, I'm serious.
But let's also add that in order to do this, Michelle hired David Axelrod to do a brainwashing campaign, essentially to dupe all the people. So the idea was that she was in charge of community relations, and community relations meant deploying a screen of bouncers to kick people out, but she had to smooth over the ruffled feelings of these poor people. One of their favorite methods was you'd go into the waiting room of the emergency room, and if you were black and you looked poor, they'd make you wait 4 or 5 hours. They'd simply ignore you and hope that you would walk out. So this is the mentality, and I think these examples, I think what's in the bill is important, but the mentality of the people carrying it out. How about Orsag, right? The bean counter, the pointy-headed bureaucrat, the head of the Office of Management and Budget. This person who has no medical credentials whatsoever is of the opinion that an MRI, a CAT scan, an ultrasound, an echocardiogram, an X-ray, this is too expensive.
These are the useless tests. I mean, the last 50 years, the most important devices they've got save tens of millions of lives. A basic test, you don't get it. But we see more examples of this. Notice he promised everybody all this free stuff. As soon as he got in, the speech he won that night, he said, it's going to be austerity. It's going to be rough. It's going to be tough. He is... exactly. How does he have half-brothers and brothers who are living in shacks on $1 a week? He won't help them. I mean, I help some of my family that doesn't have money. I mean, how would he not ever see his family? I mean, who is this Obama? You've studied his psychology. From watching him, he seems to really revel in conning people and lying to them. He's just a classic scam artist.
I would call him a narcissist and a megalomaniac. Now, it's interesting because we did have this interesting book, Bush on the Couch, by Dr. Justin Frank, I think, of George Washington University, which correctly diagnosed Bush as a megalomaniac, somebody with delusions of grandeur. I think we have another case of megalomania, in this case with the left-wing ideology. Obama as a narcissist. Obama, who constantly refers to himself in his speeches in the third person. He always says, as I've said repeatedly, or I've said consistently that. This complete fascination with himself. He's now going to go to Martha's Vineyard to stay on a $30 million estate for the month of August, cavorting with the rich oligarchs, the famous New England Boston Brahmins, and hedge fund operators from Wall
Street. You couldn't pay me to do that. I mean, that's just nightmarish. All the
fried clams
kill everyone? I don't know.
The fried clams are good, and my uncle used to live on Cape Cod, so I got something in favor of this. But the idea now, the narcissism, he is obviously addicted to adulation. He expects adulation, and you can see that into his mentality now, a moment of irritability is creeping in. If you saw the summit with Harper and Calderon there, Fecal.
No, he's looking more and more angry. Now when somebody doesn't answer what he wants, he tries to dominate. He tries to cut in like Spectre did today. They just are like, I'm going to make you love me, and I'm going to make you love eugenics, you little piece of trash.
I would say that we're seeing the beginnings, perhaps, of the psychological disintegration of Obama. In other words, the idea that he might lash out in rage. We've had Geithner with a temper tantrum chewing the carpet on Friday in a dispute with other regulators, fighting with Bernanke and Sheila Bair and the rest of them. Now, in that press conference in Mexico, Obama did this thing where he said, I'm somebody who always plays, a risky game. Or how did he say it? I don't go with the probabilities. I shoot the works, because if I had to calculate my chances of being here, I never would have been here. So I'm the kind of guy that's willing to do something that's not guaranteed of success. And it seemed to me that he was somehow asserting himself, right? That I'm really this great guy who came out of nowhere, and I did it all myself.
Yeah. He's a maverick when really the New World Order stork delivered him out of the bowels of hell on the White House front porch.
We can be very specific. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, these are the midwives of the Obama miracle, right? We can be very, very specific. We can even, calculate the sums of money involved. So I think that's going to be a problem for him. The town hall, the so-called town hall in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to the extent I've been able to follow it at all, seems to have been screened in the best tradition of Bush. Remember that if you were an anti-war demonstrator and you wanted to get into a Bush event, you were likely to be arrested. I don't know what happened in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's why they had the cop come up, probably a cop with the gun was a way to intensify screening and only bring in minions.